So we did cover quite a few elements already. I am going to cover a couple of more elements in this body section. So far you can see we didn't put anything in our head section yet. We'll do some a little later. In our body section, I want to quickly talk about lists. So there are two types of lists in HTML, unordered lists and ordered lists. And really the difference is, do you want to number your list or not? The common type of list you'll see is unordered lists. So that will be UL tag, stands for unordered list. Each list item in that list would be an LI. I believe it stands for list item. And this will be like item 1, that will be the text for that. And then if I just keep repeating that, LI, so I'm gonna do 2, 3, 4, save that. So that's gonna be my list items in this unordered list. So right now, if I save this, go back and reload, that's that list on top. See, we have this bulleted point list. So to convert these to an ordered list, all you have to do is just change UL to OL. The rest of the structure is going to remain the same. So if I just do that and go back and reload this, you'll see it's going to say 1, 2, 3, 4. So that's really the difference between doing unordered lists and ordered lists. I'm going to change this back to unordered lists. You could have another unordered lists below here someplace. So let's say we have 2 of them. Just like that. Now I'm going to have 2. So if I save this, let me actually remove this third item here. Change this a little bit so we don't have the same text. So that should take care of it. Now we should have 2 lists. This is the first one. This is the second one. You could also have one list being a sublist of a list. So if I take this list, I'm going to cut that. You could make it a sublist of another list by going inside of one of the list items. So for example, this list item 2, right before you close that container for a list item, I can just add that code. Usually to make this more readable, I would just send this to a new line like this and paste it here. I still leave this text on top, so that's fine. Let's align this to make it look nice, something like this. Now this list item includes a whole other list here. So if I save this and go back and reload, you'll see that it will show up as a sublist of this item. So that's our sublist. Then you can do another sublist in this list by breaking one of these LIs and putting another list inside of that. So you could do that. You could also make the inner list an ordered list by using OL. If I save this and go back and reload, you'll see it goes 1, 2, 3 in here because now it's an ordered list. So that's your ordered and unordered lists. Finally, I'm going to talk about HTML tables. So table is more like a spreadsheet type of structure where you can basically show some data. So to create a table, we're going to use table object in HTML. You're going to have new rows in that table, which is going to be TR, table row. And in that row, you will have table cells. So each cell, it's like a new column. You can think about it in this structure. So if I do something like TH, that's a table header cell. Basically, that's the first labels of your table. So this would be, for example, name. And then I could do another one of these. And now I have 2 of them. And now I do something like price. So let's say we have a table where we have the first column is product name. The second column is product price. So that would be the first column, the second column. If you wanted the third column, you basically repeat this one more time. So this is the first header row in our table. So if I want to do another row, that would require me to do another TR, another row in this table. And in that row, you would have your TD, which I think stands for table data cell or something like that. So these would be the actual cells. So let's say this is going to be something like coffee. And then to do the second column, you basically just repeat that TD again, and that would be the price. to match the columns. So 450, something like that, doesn't matter. And for any new row, you would basically just repeat that same row structure all over again, and that should just work. So now let's say this is T, and you do another pricing for that, and now this should be a data table. So if I save this, go back and look, it will probably not look a lot like a data table to you. See, we have this, the header, first column, second column, then we have coffee, we have the price, we have tea, we have the price. And for each new row, we're gonna have to just keep repeating this TR structure all over again. So basically just copy paste the same thing, or you could just type it, doesn't matter. So this will be the next item. See, it still has the 2 columns in a new row. So that will now have another row. So that would be the structure you would do in your tables. Sometimes you'll have T head and T body elements surrounding some parts of your table. So for example, you could have this T head, and that's like the table head section. And then you would have the head section go inside of that T head. And this just helps mostly pretty much with CSS, probably more than with anything else. So now I will have this first row of that table inside of the head section of that table. And then you could also have the T body section, which will basically be the body of that table, similar to T head. You could just wrap this whole thing with all these rows. That's the body of your table inside of the table body thing. This T body, and that's another element. So these are not required. You could have them if it helps you. So if I save this, reload, nothing is really gonna change. See, it's the same thing. It's just basically a box around that area. Could be used for styling with CSS and things like that. And then sometimes you'll have the T foot, which is the footer area of your table. So maybe if you have a footer area of your table, you'll have another like row or maybe multiple rows inside of that footer area of your table. And for that, we can do something that has a longer span of columns. So this is a lot like having like a merged cell in a spreadsheet. So if I save this, for now, it's not gonna be, this is just TD. It's gonna be the same size as the sugar column, the first column. And if we go back here and reload, see, because this text is long, it's gonna push that column wider, and now everything in that column is wider. Now what we can do, we can merge these 2 columns for this cell together, so it keeps going and includes this second column in there too, which I can do by adding this attribute to that TD called call span. And then I can say that should go through 2 columns. So if I do 2, it's gonna take spacing of 2 columns. If I save this, go back and reload, now you'll see how this goes across this whole thing. Now it's very hard to see what's actually happening here because there is really no styling for this table. So you would do CSS to do some styling to actually see those lines. Just to show you very quickly to add some lines to the table, I'm gonna go inside of this head section and add a style container to do some fast CSS and just style that TD element, the table data cell, and just add some border to that so that we can see what that looks like. So I'm not really doing this to teach you about CSS. This is more just to show you what's going on with our table. So this should just add a border around that so we can see what's going on. So if I reload this, see, we can actually now see the actual lines across the cell, and you can see how this one goes across those 2 columns. I'm gonna go back. So that's pretty much what I'm gonna cover from body sections. So again, you put in body section everything that you want visible on a page. Head section is mostly for other things. So for example, you can see one is style. So I can put a style in there or a link to a style sheet that will just make things look different. In your head section, you will also have things like meta tags. So for example, we can add a meta tag. So the meta tags will have a name, and they will also usually have content. And you can see that meta tag is not a container, doesn't have opening and closing. So the name for this will be description. This is not really going to show up for the user. So if I save this and reload, this is not really visible on the page, but you do this for like search engines, for Google, and I don't know, maybe Facebook. So that's an example of a meta tag. A meta tag that will likely show up a lot will be this meta tag that has the character set, where you define the character set that you're going to be using. UTF-8, that would be the character set I'll be using here. That was the reason we were probably getting this error over here that says that we don't know what character set you're gonna have. So now if I save this and reload this, we should get rid of that error that was showing up here. See, meta viewport tags very likely show up here. I'm just going to use these abbreviations to get it done really quickly here. So this is the viewport set. You do this for making your pages responsive and compatible with mobile devices. And you will also probably do this one for Windows phone devices or mobile devices. So all of these things are not going to really show up for the user. There is one thing that you can kind of see in the head section. So if you go and reload your page, see if I look here on top, this is basically just a long path in the file name, which is kind of annoying. And we can change that by adding a title tag in our head section, and it's a container, and we'll say HTML lesson. So if I save this, go back and take a look, reload this, see it says HTML lesson. Like anything else, you could deal with all of these things the same way in JavaScript. So if I want to change that title here on top, that title is a container and it has this text content, which is going to be the inner part of it. So if I wanted to change that, I could just simply go and find that title. So I can just go document and then use my get element by tag name. Actually, that's elements, but that's fine. We'll deal with that. So that's the title element. So if I search, see there is just one, and that one is going to be the first one in this collection. So let's actually get to that first one by adding square bracket 0. So that will just give us the title. So now if I want to change the text, that will be text content. That's the inner side of that title, and I'll set it to new title. So right now, if you look here, it says HTML lesson. If I run this, oh, I don't know what I did here, but I removed the text content part. The text content, there it is, see, new title. Again, you can work with it exactly the same way we've been working with any other element. Again, we have our tags, we have our attributes, we have our values. One other thing I want to talk about is that style will have CSS in it. So you can also get with your JavaScript to that CSS if necessary. And if you look here in my CSS, I have this TD. And for that TD, I have this border that I set to 1 pixel solid black. So let's go and find the styles. So if I open our JavaScript, let's reload this. And if I go to document, see there is going to be something that's called style sheets here. If I open that, that will be, as you can see, a list. And we only have just one. So the 0 is going to be that style sheet. And if I open that one, well, actually, let me just go to that first one first. So 0 to narrow it down to just that one. So if I open this, see we have all of these different properties for this, like CSS rules. So we defined this rule for this TD, as you can see, and then we have the style for it. Let's just do one. So I'm going to go inside of the CSS rules and then grab the first one out of here. So I do this, CSS rules, and then we need to get the first one in there. So that will get us to this. And in here, if I wanted just to change the CSS text, which is currently what it is in that box, I could do that. Or I could even go inside of this style and start playing around with what's in there, which is what I'm gonna do probably, because that's probably more useful than this style. So inside of this style, we'll have all these different CSS properties. So if I search, see there's the border property. So if I take that border property, I can change it to whatever the new thing is gonna be. 2 pixel solid red. It used to be 1 pixel solid black. So if I do this, see, I've changed it, and now we can see in the background, it changed to 2 pixel solid and red color. You can also just go find individual elements and modify their styles. And that's more like having, to give you an example of that, let's actually just scroll down a little bit here and apply to this first list item in this list. I'm gonna add a style attribute. So we'll do font color green. And that would be just color, no font. So we're gonna save this, go back and take a look at this again. So you see how this one is green because we just did this style for this particular list item. Let's go and change that color to a different color. Only I'm going to do it with JavaScript. So we can find that list item by doing document get element by tag name, I guess. We'll do that. And we'll do the tag is called li. And let's open that collection. See, in that collection, that's the first one that gets that color. So if I wanted to select the first one, that would be 0. And now we can modify the style for that. So if I do .style, then I can just change different things about the style. So for example, I can change the color to be a different color, yellow. Hit enter, see that modifies that to yellow. So if I go back now to my inspector and take a look in my HTML after this, we'll see that inside of that UL, see, there is this style that now says color yellow, while initially it was not yellow, it was green. So if I just refresh this page, it should go back to green. So there it is, color green. But mostly this type of things are not something that are suggested to do. So you probably want to avoid doing inline styles as much as possible. Instead, what you want to do, you want to assign styles to an item. So what that means, if you already have defined something here, let's say we defined a class in our CSS, blue color, and that is color blue. And maybe it also changes the size of the font to font size 22px. Maybe we'll do the font weight also to change to bold. So now what I want to do, I want to just add this blue color class to this list item here. So right now, if I just go manually add a class blue color to this one, because that's the same class as I've defined here, that should just work. So if I go back and reload this, see, that's blue and it's bigger and it's bolder. Anyways, we have some changes. But what I want to do instead of doing this, I want to initially have it not have that class at all. So something like this. I want to then go and assign that class that's already in our CSS right here, this blue color, to that list item, this one. So to do something like that, again, you'll have to search your HTML and find the element you're trying to target. So again, bunch of different ways of doing it. I'll just stick with the one we did the last time. So we'll find the elements by tag name, and that was li. And if you remember, we grabbed the first item from that list, press enter, that should show us that's the list item. If I roll over, see the Firefox will kind of highlight that for me so I know what that is. So that's good. Now I want to assign that class to this. So what I'm going to do this class list. And what this is going to give us, it's going to give us the current list we have. So see, it gives us this list. So right now we have no classes in there. But what we can do now, we can take that and add something to that list. So there it is, blue color. So I'm going to add that class. Let's watch what happens in the background as I run this piece of code. So if I do this, and now we have that blue. And if I go to my inspector here, we'll see that now that list item has that blue color class attached to it. We can also remove those. So instead of adding them, if I go here and do remove, I'm removing that same class, blue color. See, it's gone. If I do add again, it's back. We can add it to something else. Let's add it to our second list item. So I'll change it to 1. That's this. And that also has all the child elements now colored. In our HTML, however, it's just a CSS thing that it's going to do for all of them. But if I open and explore the list item, you'll see that the inner list doesn't have those classes. We just assigned a class to this second list item. It's just because the CSS is cascading, it grabs all of them inside as well. Good, so that hopefully gives you a little bit of an idea that we can also get inside of CSS and change it if you already know CSS. If you don't worry about this. It's probably going to be just too confusing. Keep in mind that I'm not going over all the possible HTML elements that are available. I'm just going over only the ones that are very commonly used in most projects. So if you wanted the actual full list of what's available in HTML, you probably want to go to Mozilla documentation. Let me just open that for you. So let me actually put that in here. And by the way, since we didn't do any HTML comments, this would be a great time to do one. So if you wanted to add some notes in your HTML, you can use HTML comments. And the syntax for an HTML comment would be this. You have this opening like this and closing like that. So that's, again, not an element, that's a comment. So here you can just write some notes, and this can be going through multiple lines like this as well, as long as you have this closing. So none of this will actually render on the page. So if I save this and run, we'll see there's nothing above our table. So it's just a comment. So I'm just going to add this link here instead. So if you follow that link, it will take you to their documentation. And if I scroll down a little bit here, see there is this references HTML elements. If I open this, it will give you pretty much the full list of what's available. If you see any of these icons on the left, that usually means this is discontinued or it's about to be discontinued or something like that. So basically you can ignore those that have that little whatever icons around them. The rest are all gonna be valid HTML elements. So if you want to explore more, feel free to do so. And in the next video, we'll probably talk about all the container boxes like div, section, etc. For this one, there should be plenty. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.